it's a bit hard to say, but I think looking at the various indicators, I think there's still reason to expect further growth. One, on the back of lower interest rates. Those are feeling that interest rates at some point would start surging. But I think on the back of inflation information showing that inflation is more or less subdued and has been falling, interest rates have remained fairly stable. So I think on the basis of that, plus of course the news that the economy is still growing, expected to grow by 5% according to the Central Bank of Kenya, then we should expect the market to continue peaking.
5% growth, inflation sitting at 3% last month from around 3.2% the previous month. So clearly inflation on the downward spiral. We're starting to see the lower prices when it comes to food filtering through into the inflation number, and also looking at the price wars that have ensued, bringing cell phone rates down by around 50%. Where do you see the inflation figure going from here onwards, and what kind of impact do you think it's going to have on the interest rate environment? In other words, do you think we could see another interest rate cut by the end of this year?
One, I think inflation by and large in Kenya is driven by weather patterns, because it's mainly the two key areas to watch are normally food and non-alcoholic beverages, and of course energy. And those two basically depend on weather patterns. If rainfall is good, then of course there's enough food, there's enough water to generate hydropower, and inflation remains subdued. So a lot of that is actually going to depend on the sufficiency of the current short rain season, and we hope at least things will remain well in order, so that by early next year we should not expect a lot of distortions as far as prices are concerned.
Taking a look at some numbers out in today's session, Kenyan investment company City Trust, a 16% increase in pre-tax profit to 36 million Kenyan shillings for the year to July. Of course, we have been seeing some great third quarter earnings coming through. We saw numbers from Equity Bank last week. We've also seen some good numbers coming through from Housing Finance. Do you think it's going to be all around some good numbers for the third quarter of 2010?
Generally speaking, I think banks have definitely not disappointed as had earlier been expected. And I think, of course, one of the main factors behind this is that in as much as lending rates have come down, deposit rates tended to go down by a greater proportion, meaning that by and large spreads were more or less higher than what they were a year ago. And on the basis of increased loan books and a robust economy, then of course profitability has been very, very favorable. And it's actually expected that the remaining banks that haven't announced, at least the listed banks, are still going to continue to keep investors happy, even in the current quarter as you draw towards the end of the year. So banks by and large continue to be the market favorites based on expectations about their performance.
Well, the spurt of growth that is coming through from some of the bank's investment companies as well. Some are questioning whether we could see sustainable earnings going forward from here. Where do you think earnings are going to go? I mean, do you think they're going to average out and perhaps showing headline earnings per share up between 20 and 30%, far lower than the around 50% that we have seen from some of these companies?
I think the challenge basically depends on two factors. First is actually whether the economy will continue growing as expected, especially coming into next year. And of course, there are no reasons to show otherwise. And then, of course, the second factor that might actually open a new door for banks in terms of expansion and growth is the region, the East African Common Market Protocol. So I think with a greater market out there, and most banks have actually been opening branches in a region, in neighboring countries, and the growth opportunities in those countries is actually expected to, at least sustain their earnings momentum moving forward.
Taking a look at numbers that we're expecting out this week, Kenyan Airways, some people are expecting a bit of a recovery there, and of course highly anticipated Safaricom earnings set to be released next week. Which other companies are you looking out for that you think could be quite important and pertinent to market direction going forward?
There's some at least listed banks, including Standard Chartered Bank, which today was one of the companies that went up the highest in price. Of course, on the basis of expectations of very, very good earnings for third quarter. Another, of course, is a Cooperative Bank, which last week announced a 21% stake, taking up a 21% stake in an insurance company. And of course, that is expected to continue adding on to its non-interest income. And of course, with the expected growth in the other banking business, they should be able to continue posting higher earnings. So those two, I think, would definitely be top on the list in terms of investors' expectations.